Hello, and welcome to Senior Speak New Hampshire on your Concord TV. I am Karen Ulmer Dorsch, the producer host of this program that is sponsored by AARP, and I'm an AARP volunteer. Sometimes in life things don't go according to the way they're supposed to go. And it just so happened that this particular session, I had someone lined up, and that person had an emergency, and I learned very quickly that she wasn't available for this particular program. And the wonderful thing is that Christina Fitzpatrick, who is our AARP New Hampshire State Director, was available, and it's November, and we want to talk about the general election. And so, and I've been wanting Christina to be on the program. She came to us. When did you come, Christina?
2 months ago.
2 months ago, and I was going to have her here right away, and then we weren't able to. So, Christina, welcome, and let our viewers know you. Tell us a bit about you.
Sure. Thank you, Karen, for having me here, that is. And thank you for doing this show. It's a wonderful service, and I think everybody should know what a big contribution you make to AARP.
It's my gift. I'm telling you, I love it.
Yeah. I'm really glad. And so I moved here from Washington, D.C. 2 months ago. I spent 15 years at AARP before that working in the public policy area of AARP. And so there are two different departments that deal with policy at AARP. One is the lobbying shop. So those are the people who go to Capitol Hill. They're the people who go to the state houses around the country, and they're deciding for any given year, any given session, what are our priorities and what are we going to really focus our efforts on. Because there are so many issues that affect people 50 and older, and if we tried to do all of them, we wouldn't be able to do any of them well.
Right.
So it's important to prioritize, and the states do that, and the national office does that. There's another part of AARP that reports up to a different executive vice president that is focused on policy and research. And the idea there is that we have the luxury and the mandate to try to think ahead. So it's not about what we should be saying in Congress tomorrow.
Right.
It's how do we prepare so that next year or the year after we are prepared for the debates that may emerge, so that when things come up, we've already thought about them, we've already talked about it, we've already established some consensus, and had the AARP leadership understand these issues enough to be comfortable with how AARP is going to show up on these different topics.
So, before we get into what you came from Washington, D.C. to Concord, New Hampshire. That's a big change. What are some things that you're missing?
Well, mostly I'm missing my friends. So I had lived in Washington for over 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And so I had built up a nice community there. And there's a lot of that was made through connections with through my kids. So I have a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old, and we've always been really involved in their schools and their soccer teams and their other things. So we met people who are the parents of their friends, and I established a lot of great relationships and friendships that way.
Surely. Now, and those children are with you here, or?
One of them is in college. He just started college a couple months ago. So he started in college and I started here. And the other one is 15, so he's in high school.
So he's in high school. Does he go to Concord High?
We're in Bow.
Oh, you're in Bow. Okay. And is he adjusting well? Because that's a big change too.
It is a big change. But he has a sense of adventure about him, and kind of
grand.
Yeah. He's
That's
kind of
grand.
looking for the challenge, glad to try some new things, meet new people.
Right. Were you familiar with the state prior to moving here?
I didn't know a lot about New Hampshire, but I did marry into a New England family. So my husband grew up around the Boston area, and he has 5 brothers and sisters who still live there. all around the Boston area. So I've spent time in New England.
Yeah.
It's really such a treat to be nearby them.
Yeah, that would be
Mhm.
very nice.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not near any of my family, and I know
Yeah.
how that goes.
Yeah.
Okay, so prior to AARP, were you in service work or?
I worked for several different nonprofits in Washington, D.C. that were policy advocacy organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And so prior to AARP, I was really focused on research and writing.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote reports, I wrote fact sheets and talking points and things like that. And tried my background, my strength is in quantitative analysis. So I actually like numbers and working with spreadsheets and graphs and things like that.
Wow.
And numbers can tell a story in a way that words can't. They can have an impact. And so I wanted to be somebody who was producing the numbers who could really drive a point home and really illustrate the impact and the importance of some of these policy topics I was working on. And so that was my goal, was to impact the policy debate that way.
So once now you are in this position that you're in, what have been some unexpected things that have happened, or things you know, positive,
Mhm.
good things,
Yeah.
things not so positive?
Well, the one huge positive is getting to meet the volunteers who are so fundamental to AARP's work in the state. You are one among several really, you're one of our really strong volunteers who is involved in so many different things. And we're lucky that we have many volunteers.
And we do.
Yeah.
In New Hampshire, we have a tremendous number of our volunteers, our AARP volunteers, who love the work they're doing and are excited to be doing it.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
It's so important. It really expands what AARP New Hampshire is able to do. Because we're 5 staff people, which is, it's a decent size. But because of the volunteers, we can cover so many more events and we can do so much more.
Right.
And so I'm really appreciative of that and have had just a ball talking to people and learning about their backgrounds and what interests them. And I really admire all the time that people are willing to spend with AARP.
We had a terrific Movies for Grown Up last night.
I
At the
heard
Regal
that,
Theater,
yeah.
where the Crawdad sings, and it was wonderful. It was just wonderful. Okay, so now we're moving into general election time. Let's talk a little bit about what that means, because of course, in New Hampshire, we're all about voting.
Yep.
We really are. And that our age group is the age group that votes.
Right. Right.
So let's talk about issues that we focus on and are concerned about.
Well, let me just mention one number, as we were talking about, that I learned today that people 50 and older make up 62% of the electorate. Of the people who go to the polls for the election, about 62% of them are likely to be people 50 and older. So that just tells you about the power of this voting bloc.
And this is nationwide, or
this is in New Hampshire.
This is in New Hampshire. Yeah.
And so what we are trying to convey to candidates is that fact, and just how important older voters are and how much they need to be paying attention to the issues that are important to older voters.
Right.
And of course, a lot of those overlap with interests of everyone. So everybody's facing higher fuel prices, utilities, food.
Right.
That's housing. That's something that affects everybody. People 50 and older may have a different perspective on that, especially if they're relying exclusively on Social Security, things that it means that they have a little less flexibility than people who are still working.
Right.
So that's one thing that AARP is trying to convey during this time, is that people 50 and older vote. They want their issues to be addressed, and it really matters to politicians. Like, they need to listen.
Right. Okay. And can you talk a little bit about how voting has it changed? Haven't there been some changes?
There have been some changes. There was some redistricting that was done at the state and federal level, and so the people that you see on your ballot may be a little different than they were last time around. So it's important to investigate that so that you're not surprised when you get to the ballot box, and so that you can do whatever research you want to do ahead of
Right.
time to be able to cast an informed vote.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the biggest change. So there are some things that people should know is that while there is, you can register to vote obviously before Election Day, but even if you didn't get to your town clerk's office to be able to do that, you can still go to your poll on the day of the election and present your ID and things and say, I want to register to vote here. And you will be able to vote. They will set aside your ballot until they confirm that you are eligible to vote. And once they affirm that, then they will count your ballot. So it's important to know that even if you didn't get around to going to the town clerk's office, you can still cast your ballot.
And if people want to vote by mail or vote early, what are restrictions there? Because I think that's changed also from last time.
So for absentee ballots,
Yes.
you have to qualify based on a job responsibility, a caregiving responsibility, a disability. So there are certain categories that, and only people in those categories can qualify for an absentee ballot.
Right.
And so people can go to the Secretary of State's website, which is sos.nh.gov, and they can get the complete list of who qualifies for an absentee ballot. And only people who qualify for an absentee ballot can vote early. Everybody else
Right.
has to vote on Election Day.
Right. Unless you wake up the morning of Election Day and you have COVID.
Right, that's a good point.
And if that happens, you can go to your voting. I think you don't even have to call. I think you can go to your voting poll and call in and ask for someone to bring you a ballot to your car.
Oh,
And you can vote then from your car.
that's fantastic. I didn't know
Right,
about that.
right, yes. If you wake up that morning with COVID and you really want to vote, you still can do that. Neil Levesque told us that in his last little coffee conversation he had with us.
Good.
And so that was good to hear. But you cannot do that for any other illness. It's just COVID,
Just COVID.
that allows you to do that. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. Okay, so issues, yeah. How about what are we doing with questions for the governor and, you know, the people who are running for governor and so on and so forth? Medicare, we're interested in Medicare.
Yep. There are a few different issues that we are raising up to the governor's candidates and the Senate candidates in particular. So at the federal level, we want to know if candidates will commit to maintaining and strengthening Social Security and Medicare, that they will work to control the price of prescription drugs, and that they will take steps to enable people to age in place so that they don't have to go into a nursing home unless they really need it or they really want it. Those are 4 issues that we hear from our members and our constituents time and time again that are important to them, and that they say they are more likely to vote for candidates who will make those commitments than candidates who don't.
Right.
And then at the state level, there are some of those same issues. So prescription drug costs are important, and having access to home and community-based services for long-term care, also very important. But there are also 2 other issues that we have raised to candidates as being really important to voters 50 and older. One is the high cost of utilities, and that it's important to take whatever steps we can to lower the cost of these utilities, but also help people if they, the winters are harsh and it can be difficult for people to afford to heat their homes, and that can be just devastating. So there are programs out there that can provide people with assistance for that. And then the final issue is access to high-speed internet. Because as we've seen during the pandemic, and as more and more of life is online, it's important for people to, to be able to apply for a job, sometimes that is exclusively done online. If you want to stay in touch with family and friends who are far away, being able to see people, video calls is I found it to be much better than voice calls. My parents are in southern Louisiana.
Oh.
And at the beginning of the pandemic, we started doing video calls with them instead of just phone calls. And it's made a huge difference. It's really made our conversations much deeper and more meaningful. So we want to make sure that people have access to high-speed internet. And that means that you need the wires in the ground, so to speak. But then you also need to be able to afford it.
Right.
You need to have a device that you can, an iPad or a computer of some kind, and you need to know how to use those things. Because
Right.
if you don't have one of those four things, it doesn't matter. You
true.
need all of it.
Right.
So we are working ourselves to spread the word. There's a lot of resources that have come into the state from the federal level to try to improve access to high-speed internet. And so we are working with policymakers to get that information out to people so that people know what help is available to them and can benefit from it.
Mm-hmm. Boy, does that hit me, because I live in San Bernardino. And recently, I'd say within the last year, every time it rains, my internet goes.
Oh, no.
And that is absolutely not acceptable.
Right.
Because half of the time, I have a Zoom schedule that I can't cancel or that is important, and every single time it rains, we have off and on internet and sometimes none. So that's something that's,
Yeah.
I can appreciate very much that we're working together. And I can't even imagine for people, we don't live in the hinterland of New Hampshire as many people up north do. And so it's extremely important that they have access.
Absolutely.
And that they have it without interruption as much as possible.
Right.
We know we're going to have interruptions, but there is a limit.
Right.
Yeah.
And every time it rains is past that limit.
And we've had, and it doesn't have to be, it can be just an overcast day when there's just a few damp, just if it's damp. That's just, it drives me up a wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does. So your family lived in southern Louisiana?
I grew up in southern Louisiana.
Where?
Yep, in New Iberia,
Really?
which is the home of Tabasco sauce. That's our claim to fame.
Indeed. My husband and I lived 3 years in Lake Charles.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So Louisiana is a favorite, or it's a spot. It very interestingly, when we moved here, there were a lot. We moved here about almost 50 years ago, and there were a lot of similarities because of the French connection
Right.
of New Hampshire and Louisiana.
Yes, yes.
It was amazing how interesting that was.
Right.
Yeah.
I've noticed a lot of the French names around here, and so it feels familiar in that way, but they're pronounced very differently here than they are down there.
Yes.
So
They are.
I'm learning about how to pronounce different names around here, and town names and last names and
Right.
whatever. So
Do you get back to Washington, D.C. very often, or?
so I've been on the job for 2 months now. I've already been back once.
Okay.
And I have another trip coming up in December. So I think I'll likely be back there a couple of times, a few times a year.
Right.
Because sometimes there's something that all the state directors need to know about or, need to be a part of. And so they'll fly us in for that. So it's a good opportunity to work-wise to get to be with other state directors and to interact with people at the national office. And then for me, there's also a personal gain in that I get to see old friends and colleagues.
Surely. The thing I love most about, I don't love politics, okay? But what I love about New Hampshire is our ability to see all of the candidates that we're able to see. I don't know of any other state that has the opportunity that we have to really get to know the candidates. I know that Iowa has, it has a way, but it is the most exciting experience in New Hampshire when all of these people, you know, come in and we can actually meet them, and they become real people rather
Right.
than just somebody that you see on television.
Right.
And so that's a pretty exciting thing.
Definitely.
You have yet to do your first major presidential election.
That
in
is
the state.
right. That is right. So I'm glad that I will get to, you know, get my feet wet, get a little adjusted before I can only imagine the circus that it is.
It is absolutely, it is the most thrilling experience I've ever had, really, I
Wow.
think, because you are connected with the people who are going to be making laws for your
Yeah.
country for the next 4 years or so.
Mhm.
And to think that we have the ability to actually approach them and talk to them in person about their issue, you know, where they stand. We're nonpartisan, but boy, we want to hear how they are, what they think about what we are interested in.
I think that's a great point, Karen. I'm glad you brought that up, because there are two things that I'm really proud about. Well, there are many things I'm proud about with AARP, but with respect to elections, there are two things I want to highlight. One is that we strive to maintain our nonpartisan status so that we can be a trusted source of information for people, because those are really lacking these days. Like, it's easy to find unbalanced information out there.
Right.
It's hard to find a place where you can just get plain old information and then come to conclusions for yourself. And that's what we strive to do. So we have some websites that provide information about how people can vote. One that I'll throw out there is aarp.org/nhvotes. So that has all the information that you need to know about where to go to place your vote, what you need to do to get an absentee ballot.
Right. Repeat that again.
It's aarp.org/nhvotes.
Vote.
With an S at the end.
Okay.
NHvotes. And then we are also providing people, we talked a little earlier about these issues that are very important to people 50 and older. And we provide some explainers, some backgrounders about each of those issues, why they're important, what facets of them are being debated right now, and what people need to know. And people can find that information at aarp.org/vote. And so there's
just vote, no
just
S.
Exactly. So it's a little, yeah, a little confusing there. But yeah, we have issue briefs there that are really balanced presentations about these different topics, so that people, so our goals there are twofold. One is we want to make sure people physically can vote, that they have the information they need to cast their ballot. And then we want to help them make informed decisions. So we provide this balanced information on these important issues. We're sponsoring debates. We've created video voter guides for the governor's race and the Senate race. So we want to get the word out there so people have more information and can make informed decisions.
Right. And the important thing is that what we're providing are facts, because there's so much misinformation out there in all of our media. And I think that's really key. And we know it whenever we are encountering any of the candidates, because they know that our issues are factual, that that our information is factual.
Yes.
And viewers, when you see us at local activities, events, for example, last night at the theater, we had some of our cards that had information for people about where to vote, how to vote, and so on and so forth. So that's what we're doing when we are there. I think that next Sunday, I think it is, the 16th, I believe it's the 16th.
Yeah.
I'm going to be at the expo in Londonderry, I believe it is, the senior expo. And so that's the kind of thing that we're providing for the public when we are out in events like that. And you can stop by our booth and pick up and talk to us. We'd love to see you there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing that we're doing, Karen, that I'm sure you've heard about is a campaign we're calling In My Shoes.
Yes, tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about that.
So this is our attempt to respond to what we're hearing from people. They feel like politicians aren't listening to them, that the politicians are out of touch and aren't focused on the issues that matter to real people. And so we are giving people an opportunity to tell the candidates, this is what it's like to walk in my shoes. So people can go to another website, aarp.org/inmyshoes, and leave just a few words about what do you wish the politicians knew about your life. You know, that you're trying to balance childcare and caring for your aging parent, or anything like that. And then, so we're going to serve as that go-between of collecting stories from real people and sharing those with the politicians so that they know
Right.
they know what's
That's
important.
fantastic. So look for that, viewers. And Christina, thank you so much for being here today. And people, just remember it's important to vote. And until the next time, be good, do good, be one.